Sleeping Dogs is a 2012 open-world crime caper set in the bustling metropolis that is Hong Kong. The Sleeping Dogs story takes a bit of a departure from other open-world crime games like GTA or Saints Row, as you play from the perspective of an undercover cop sent to infiltrate a notorious triad gang, the Sun On Yee. Playing as Wei Shen, you have to navigate life as a triad and a cop. Walking the fine line between law enforcer and gangster begins to play on Wei Shen's mind, and lines become blurred. His moral compass as a cop gets challenged to the hilt as he becomes torn between the law of the land and the law of the streets. If, like me, you grew up on cheesy action movies and even cheesier martial arts movies, the story of Sleeping Dogs won't hold many surprises for you. It's a fairly simple concept, but its execution makes it a compelling tale of right and wrong and the intersection of the two. With its colourful characters and intriguing plot, the story of Sleeping Dogs propels you towards endgame at a pace. It's an interesting and fresh slant on a storytelling in a game of this ilk, and it holds your interest, making you want to see what happens next.
Get in this business for yourself, you're bound to end up like little Lanta.
Unfortunately, time has not been kind to Sleeping Dogs. The graphics are representative of a game made for the Xbox 360 PS3 generation. Textures are a touch ugly, jaggies and screen tearing are seen a few times more than I would like, and pop-in is fairly pronounced. Character models are also not great. Facial modelling is basic. You can see effort has been put into trying to express emotion on these digital faces, but it's not completely successful. Lip syncing is another area where you can tell you're playing a 12-year-old game. You feel like you're watching a badly dubbed movie. Maybe that was the intention. If so, mission accomplished. Despite the graphics not really standing up to close scrutiny, animations are pretty good. Combat kicks, punches and throws are nicely animated, and general movement of Wei Shen and the thick layer of NPCs that populate this iteration of Hong Kong are pretty convincing. Hong Kong itself is a more successful part of the graphical package. Although it's a bit ugly from a technical standpoint, a huge amount of effort was put into making this reproduction city feel like a living, breathing, densely populated metropolis, and to that end the devs have hit the bullseye. It really feels like a hot, sweaty, claustrophobic melting pot of the haves and have-nots. Another positive is performance. My playthrough sat at a nice steady frame rate even when there was a lot going on screen. Frame pacing was generally good and I didn't suffer any crashes at all. The visuals of Sleeping Dogs are definitely a product of their time, functional and not overly pretty. Sleeping Dogs scores 17 out of 25 for graphics.
Damn, Wayne! What did they do to you in America, man?
Sleeping Dogs is an open-world action game in the mould of Grand Theft Auto. Although it shares a lot of similarities with the Rockstar Monster, Sleeping Dogs is a more tightly narrative-driven affair. In GTA, a big chunk of your time will be filled with going off and doing your own thing, but in Sleeping Dogs there is less scope doing this. Side missions and activities are there, but tend to be on a smaller scale. Instead, you're driven more towards the game's main quests. As Wei Shen is an undercover cop, your missions are split between lawful activities for your police bosses and the not so lawful gangland based missions of your other bosses in the triad gang of the Sun On Yee. It creates a nice dichotomy for the player as you begin to become attached to your buddies in the gang, and this rubs up against your duty as a police officer. In Sleeping Dogs, the missions are doled out by your bosses from either faction. These missions are given to you on your mobile phone and you can quickly cycle through them, which automatically sets a course on the map, taking you to the start of that particular mission. Mission structure is a little predictable. You can tell effort has been made to vary the missions you undertake, but the feeling of deja vu does creep in at times. Once you've picked a mission to tackle, it invariably leads to combat, and this is one of the fortes of Sleeping Dogs. Unlike other GTA clones, Sleeping Dogs is heavy on hand-to-hand fighting. Wei Shen is a kung fu master, and this is translated well to the game world. The combat system is similar to that employed by the Rocksteady Batman games. Basic combat is carried out on just 3 buttons: attack, counter and grab, with more complex combos opening up as you collect your kung fu teacher's jade statues and reunite him with them. The fighting system is easy to get to grips with and is a lot of fun. This fun is ramped up by the introduction of environmental attacks. You can grab your opponent and guide them over to a highlighted bit of your surroundings and inflict all kinds of nastiness. When you get in the rhythm of a fight and manage to pull off some of these environmental takedowns mid-combat, the game becomes almost cinematic, making you feel like you're right in the middle of a martial arts flick. Enemies are not exactly many and varied, but you do have some wielding weapons and some that will counter grabs, adding a new dimension to to fights. These enemies will make sure you're not just spamming attack. This hand-to-hand combat is by far the most enjoyable aspect of the game. However, where combat is concerned, there is good news and bad news. The bad news is gunplay is pretty horrible. Aiming is clunky and enemies are a bit too spongy for my liking. Add to that some ropey cover mechanics and you'll be wishing away sections that you have to use guns. The good news is that there are not many of these sections. One slightly redeeming feature of gunplay is the vault activated bullet time. When you leap over cover, the game momentarily slows down, letting you get some slow-mo slugs off. It does make gunfights more enjoyable, but not much. Strangely, sections of the game where you are shooting from the car are much more enjoyable, as accuracy is taken out of the picture somewhat in favour of a more liberal application of bullets. While I'm on the subject of fighting, there is one fight I did not expect, and that was with the camera. I often found myself trying to wrestle control of what I wanted to look at from the game, and this was quite jarring at times. It also made driving a less enjoyable experience than it should have been. When you're not on a mission, there are a few activities you can indulge in dotted around the map, aligned with the cops or triads. These side activities are usually quite simple in nature and include things like street racing, stealing cars to order, and going on drug busts. I did find these short side diversions enjoyable. The rewards for these pint-sized missions are achievements and some of the game's progression currency, namely Triad XP and Cop XP. Your XP is then turned into points that you can plough into several skill trees, unlocking new skills and perks. When you're not being Triad muscle or upholding the law, you can indulge in some good or not so good deeds for the citizens of Hong Kong, resulting in the game's other type of progression currency, Face XP. This XP can be traded for perks and also unlocks access to clothing that provides buffs. As well as these uplifts in Wei Shen's performance, you can also find loot boxes scattered around the streets of Hong Kong that give you money, and health shrines that give you more health so Shen doesn't perish quite so quickly. The gameplay in Sleeping Dogs is generally enjoyable, and with its focus on unarmed combat, it feels a bit different to the myriad of GTA clones that surfaced after that game hit the stratosphere. Add to that the interesting slant on the story and you have a fun package. Gameplay scores 21 out of 25. The audio in Sleeping Dogs I would describe as solid. The soundtrack is fitting, with some pounding tracks accompanying the game's crunchy combat and some catchy incidental music accompanying everything else. Like all good GTA clones, there is the obligatory radio channels to choose from while you're cruising the mean streets of Hong Kong, but frankly the quality in the tracks here is hit and miss, and I found myself switching the radio off altogether a fair bit. I must give credit to the combat sound effects, which are suitably high impact. Your punches and kicks are coupled to some meaty sounding thwacks and whacks, which adds even more to the good combat system. Voice acting is also good. There are a few weak links here and there, but on average the voicing is competent and decently acted. The main character of Wei Shen, I'm happy to say, is one of the better voice performances. As he has a fair amount of dialogue, it's great that this performance is so strong. Audio in Sleeping Dogs gets 22 out of 25.
I understand, sir. Look, the sooner I'm on the street, the sooner I can start.
Sleeping Dogs is a short experience. If you just go straight through the story, you're looking at about 12 to 15 hours of gameplay, and if you want to do everything, you should plan on investing around 20 hours. It is possible to repeat missions you have already completed so you can improve your scores, and if you purchase the definitive edition, you get all 24 of the post-launch DLCs. A lot of these are just adding things like outfits, weapons and vehicles, but they do add to the game nonetheless. Replayability is limited in Sleeping Dogs. Once the credits roll and you have seen the conclusion to the story, there's not a whole heap of enticement to make you go back in. Sleeping Dogs scores 21 out of 25 for value. Sleeping Dogs manages to distinguish itself from the sea of GTA clones with its interesting and engaging story, cast of larger-than-life characters and focus on hand-to-hand combat. It's also refreshing to see an urban sprawl that isn't a thinly disguised version of New York. Some dated graphics, awkward at times camera and run-of-the-mill missions pull this game down from being very good to good. If you've had your fill of GTA but have a little room left for dessert, then Sleeping Dogs may fill that gap. I enjoyed my time with the game, and that enjoyment outweighed the game's shortcomings. Sleeping Dogs scores 81 out of 100.